I'm Tom Poole, and this is SEO in 2024.
Tom, what's your number one SEO tip for 2024?
Well, I have a few. We'll go for the number one, the absolute pinnacle, and that is to ensure that you have complete technical quality throughout an entire site. I come from a technical SEO background. That is what I do. And it's incredibly important to ensure that we have solid technical foundations for a website. If we have solid technical foundations, we can build quality content, cracking links, everything else on top of that kind of foundation. If we don't have that foundation in place, that's where things can really start to go wrong. If Google can't effectively crawl, index the content that's in place on your site, they're not going to be able to kind of get that content to perform as well as it possibly can. And you're basically not doing your content justice. You're not giving your site the best possible helping hand you can if you don't pay attention to technical SEO.
So what does good technical site quality look like in 2024?
I mean, it's going to be largely the same as it has been in 2023 and 2022 and 2021 and a few years before that. It's just making sure that Google and other search engines that you care about, making sure that they can access your site as quickly and efficiently as possible. Not only that, it's also making sure that users can also access and engage with the content in place on your site easily and effectively. That means that content loads quickly. It's easy for users to get to what they want, so that you have a solid information architecture. It's easy for them to find stuff that they're looking for. Pages have relevant schema and stuff in place. Just making sure that you're kind of following those best practice guidelines and making sure that Google and users can find stuff as easy as they possibly can.
So are you finding because SEO in terms of content is perhaps changing a little bit, perhaps thanks to the advancements within AI, that an SEO's eyes is off the ball a little bit when it comes to good technical setup?
Yes, I feel that a lot of SEOs, and I am also guilty of this, we get distracted by the next best thing, right? So, 6 months ago, everyone was raving about ChatGPT and how it's going to change the world. And then we realized that it's actually not that great, going to change the world yet. And a lot of people will try and, go for the next and greatest possible thing. And it can be really easy to forget about the basics. And if we get the basics right, then we can then start exploring these next and greatest. But you've got to get those basics done first.
And how often do we need to come back to the basics? Because obviously site bloat can happen, things can change without you even realizing about it. So how often do you have to go back to the basics? And do you have some kind of checklist that you go back to on a, say, monthly basis just to make sure everything is optimized?
I mean, you should never forget about the basics. Every time you launch a new section of a site, make sure it is technically sound. That's just kind of part and parcel of procedure, I guess. If you have to have a checklist, sure. You'd have 10, 15 things on that checklist that you do on, a monthly basis. A good starting point for that is to use Screaming Frog's crawl scheduling. Set up a daily or weekly crawl, get data pulled into a Looker Studio report automatically. That can be a fantastic first starting point. If you're looking to kind of start kind of implementing these kind of reports on a regular basis, that can be a really good way of getting started with just kind of keeping an eye on the basics and not forgetting about them. Once it's set up, it just runs in the background. You don't have to run a crawl manually every single day. Once you've got that set up, it will just do it in the background. You can then just review a Looker Studio report at the start of a day, and that's that. It makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Okay, that's a great specific tip there. So set up Screaming Frog to go into Looker there. Are there any alerts that you set up so you don't necessarily have to check all the time, but if an issue does occur, and if so, what kind of alerts would you set up?
So I would set up an email alerting system, perhaps where you see a spike in 404s. So where, say every site above a certain size is going to have some 404 errors. It's just part of the internet. If you see a spike in them, or you see a spike in redirects, or you see a spike in basically anything that shouldn't be, and it happens, on a single day, you will definitely want to get a report or an email alert sent to you based on that. You can use numerous things for that. So if you've got data that's being pulled into Google Sheets, you can use an app script that's probably about this long. It's like not that long at all. You can even get, as we mentioned earlier, you can get ChatGPT to do things. You can do that get it to do that for you. Write a script that will send you an email any time it goes above like a base level, or it has a certain percentage increase. You can use Python if that's more your game. If you don't want to touch any scripts at all, you can use Zapier. So plug that into your sheet, and anytime the sheet value goes above a certain, or a cell value goes above a certain number, it can then send you an email alert. If you really want to kind of level things up even more, you can get it to send Slack alerts as well. So it'll ping you a direct message on Slack saying, hey, by the way, notice your site has seen an increase in errors. Again, just having that kind of that view on the basics, it can be really really important, especially if a client, for instance, adds a no index to their homepage. You can catch it on the same day, and you can save them a lot of lost revenue.
And ideally, it would be great to get really specific with the alerts. For instance, if you've noticed maybe a sudden loss in conversions from a particular device, maybe an iPad for an example, it would be lovely to get an alert to say over the last week or so we've had 100 iPad conversions, and suddenly over the last 2 days we've had nothing or so. Is it possible to set up an alert like that as well?
Yeah, of course. If you're using Google Analytics 4, for instance, and you're pulling that into that, you could pull that into the same Looker Studio report, maybe get it to automatically sync with Google Sheets, so you can set up alerts that way as well, where it refreshes the same time every single day. You pull that data into that one location, and then you can just get it to set up alerts that way. I'm a big fan of Google Analytics 4. I know a lot of people aren't in the SEO industry, and it's a subject of much debate, but I actually quite enjoy the way it kind of basically classifies everything as an event, and you can get it to track events for everything. So you set up Tag Manager to track those specific conversions that you want to be looking at, and you can set up alerts that way too.
And what about site speed? Is that still a significant impact on user experience, user behavior?
On user experience, absolutely. Whether it's as strong a ranking factor as people say, I think it's part of that overall EEAT, so experience, expertise, authority, and trust. Speed is a part of experience. So how a user experiences your website. If it's incredibly slow, there's going to be a massive drop-off in potential conversions and potential money that people are spending on your site. If you get into, your site loads in a second and you could do this really technical tweak to save you, a millisecond, it's probably not worth doing that, to be honest, unless you're trying to get the fastest site possible. It's all about trade-offs, right? So actually working out, if I make this site 4 seconds faster, it's going to have this kind of impact on my revenue, versus if I make it 0.01 seconds faster, what kind of impact is that going to have? And usually it's the more seismic changes that are going to have the bigger impact.
And how do you determine if technical underperformance is actually impacting user behavior?
Usually you can tell pretty quickly. So if you look at a site and you see that it's got like a lot of kind of technical issues, you can pretty quickly tell that that's probably going to be causing a lot of problems. And it's also like about experimenting with it as well. So if you think something's causing a problem and it's like a site-wide issue, just fix it on a single page, track that single page granularly. So look at literally every single metric, your impressions, your clicks, your click-through rate, but also your conversions on that page, how long people spend on that page, their scroll behavior. Do they, spend a long time on the page trying to find what they're looking for? Do they immediately go to that CTA? Is it clear for users, what their kind of next step is?
So if users tend to be happy with your site, is there any point in actually trying to go for further technical improvements?
It's a great question. I would always say yes. I'd always try and get to the best possible technical version of a site, even if users are happy. You've got to keep both users and bots, so Google bot, Bing bot, GPT bot. You've got to keep them happy when they're crawling your site. The happier they are, to reduce it down, the more they're going to crawl. So the faster they can crawl your site, and the more valuable content they find, the more frequently and the faster they'll crawl your site. So be able to kind of keep that index, refresh, making sure that we're serving the most relevant content to users.
And of course, it's wonderful to be able to future-proof your site, to be able to cope with larger amounts of traffic. But how do you know how far to go in terms of future-proofing? I mean, do you double capacity? Do you even go more? Is there a particular metric to aim for there?
I mean, I'd go for something that's scalable. So I would go for, I guess it's going to depend on your what you estimate is going to happen. If you're running a really like a viral link campaign, for instance, you're running a really viral kind of like PR campaign, and you haven't got your site's kind of bandwidth basically set up to deal with that, you're going to be in for some problems. But if you have something that, when the PR team, for instance, are going to make like this massive push, there's going to be a viral effort, for instance, you want to up capacity prior to that so that they can, it can deal with any sort of potential kind of bandwidth that's going to be used. I guess communication is the key there, is making sure that any person who is working on your site knows what's happening, whether that's the developer who's going to be, kind of fiddling around with the back end, or that's a PR who is, doing their best work, getting links and, getting traction for the site on an organic level. There just needs to be great communication between every kind of member there.
And talking about communication, if you work for a large-ish organization, then you'll probably be called upon to do some form of SEO training, or at least explain what you want to do to different marketing departments, customer service, other departments in the organization. So how much technical SEO knowledge is appropriate to share internally with non-SEOs to give them a feel of what you're trying to do?
As much as they're happy to absorb. I guess always start with the basics. And then if they're happy with those kind of, the basic level of stuff, what is technical SEO, the 3 pillars of the 3 pillars of SEO, how it all kind of pulls into the wider marketing view, how technical SEO impacts developers, like all that sort of stuff. If people are happy with that, by all means, start training your clients on further technical topics. The only kind of limit is their kind of thirst for knowledge. With a lot of our clients, for instance, we offer training for them. So if, they're not particularly as clued up on technical SEO as the SEO agency, that we are, it can offer great value to them to just, start giving them training on specific topics, just so they understand a little bit more about why we're doing what we're doing. And that can give great fuel to the fire for getting stuff implemented.
And finally, reporting internally on the value of technical SEO. Do you have any thoughts on measuring the financial value of technical SEO improvement?
Oh, that's a very tricky question. And the answer probably isn't going to be that simple. Because if you make a change on a site, it usually comes along with other changes as well. It's scarcely going to be a single thing at once. So it can be quite hard to report on certain implementations. You change some technical aspect of things. It can be quite hard to report that directly or attribute it directly. It's good to understand the trends. So you remove the no index tag and it started going up in SERPs. That's kind of obvious, right? But if you kind of change a few redirects around, you kind of optimize speed a little bit, you add some further structured data, it can be a little bit trickier to understand kind of what change resulted in the specific impact. But the longer you do these sorts of things, the more you understand a little bit more about, okay, if I do that, it's probably going to, there's a higher percentage chance that the traffic will go up. In regards to reporting, it's just tracking literally everything. You won't have everything in a report, but it's just making sure you're tracking every single possible metric that you would like to have visibility on, so you can report on that if you need to.
If an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time on technical SEO in 2024?
Stop faffing about with stuff you don't need. So, if you're like, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're all focused on trying to do the latest and greatest things. And sometimes you don't need to do that. You can literally do just the basics and then build upon those basics. If you get the basics down, 90% of the time, you'll be all good. Yeah, I just say, stop spending time on stuff that is inconsequential.
Is there a quick and easy way to determine whether or not a task that you happen to be doing is inconsequential?
I guess I'm going to put my automation hat on here and say that if something you're doing is boring and it's repetitive and it's something that you would like to not do, consider finding a way to automate that, to take the load off of you. And that doesn't mean finding the latest and greatest solution. It means just finding a way to get a machine to do that work for you. So sometimes it can be using Python to do a bit of large scale data analysis. Great example is if you take an export from Screaming Frog and you typically analyze it in Google Sheets or Excel. When that export gets to be over a certain size, it can be rather painful to analyze in a spreadsheet. If you use Python to do that, not only will you save yourself the time of kind of just loading up in the spreadsheet, but it will also make that task highly, highly repeatable within the future. So if you wanted to run that same thing, that same analysis for a different client, you can do that with exactly the same script, and it will run in the same way. So I guess automation is the name of the game there. And
Python appears to be the name of the book as well, because it's certainly not the first mention of Python in this particular series. So certainly something to think about there. Tom Poe is a technical and training director at Blue Array, and you can find him over at bluearray.co.uk. Tom, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2024.
Thank you very much.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2024, the book, over at SEOin204.com.